Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with our wonderful friend, Patricia Raybon. Christie Award winner Patricia Raybon was reared near Denver, Colorado, under big sky, bright sunshine, and the humbling mystery of Christ. A newspaper journalist who turned to historical fiction, she authors devotional writing for Our Daily Bread Ministries and writes the Annalise Spain mystery series set in Colorado's 1920s Klan era. She and her husband Dan live in their longtime beloved neighborhood in beautiful Aurora, Colorado. Patricia and I have collaborated more times than I can count, including the Frederick Buechner Writers Workshop at Princeton Seminary and the Publishing in Color and Writing for Your Life Spiritual Writers Conferences. You can learn more about all of Patricia's work at patriciaraybon.com. So Patricia, as always, it's just so wonderful to see you again, and I'm so glad that you're doing well.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be seen, invited, and noticed. Recently, Brian, I got invited to cut the ribbon at a new Barnes& and Noble store near Boulder, Colorado.
Really? Oh, goodness.
And the feeling was how nice it was to be seen and noticed and invited. And, you know, among millions and millions of authors, some may not tell the truth about this, but it's nice for somebody to say, oh, I noticed you. Come do this. Come talk to me. Come cut a ribbon. So thank you for having me today. That means a lot.
Well, just the fact that there's a new bookstore opening is kind of a watershed event, right? I mean, because I know Barnes& and Noble had closed some more, but
Right.
hopefully that's stabilized, and it's nice to hear that they're growing.
I don't know if it's just this part of the country, but Barnes& and Noble has a new CEO I think we might have talked about that has
Yeah.
allowed the in-store managers to have the autonomy to decide the books they want to feature and promote instead of just following a list from New York City, for example, or somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen it make a huge difference in my part of the world. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I hope they're getting back into the mode of inviting authors to come and speak and do signings and such, because that had been gradually fading away. And then, of course, during the pandemic, it went away completely. Are you seeing more of that happening again?
That's my experience. And not only that, at the stores, there are often signs at the checkout stands or on the front door that say, that ask, are you a local author?
Oh,
Come in,
really?
introduce yourselves. Let's schedule a
Wow.
signing.
Huh?
So I'm seeing that a lot. It's very welcoming feeling to an author. This past summer, I called it a summer of signings. I did a signing at every Barnes& and Noble store in the state of Colorado. And,
Oh, you're
and
kidding. Oh, my goodness. Good for you.
so there was a lot of driving and going, but you meet people and get your books out there. So I hope they continue to do that. I think I can
Yeah.
see that's making a difference.
So, why don't you catch us up with what the latest is in your, kind of author world? What have you been up to lately?
Well, the coolest thing is a mention in the New York Times. And I think you know about that. But,
Yeah.
my series has 3 books now. The first one won a Christie Award, which was wonderful. The second one, Double the Lies, was Christianity Today's 2024 book winner for fiction. And then fairly recently, the New York Times mentioned the third book in the series, Truth Be Told, gave it top billing in the book review on an article called Four Great Fictional Detectives.
Yes. Yes, I
And
do.
so when I saw that, I thought, well, maybe I'm learning how to write these things because as you know, maybe some of the people who may be kind enough to watch today, I've spent my career in newspaper journalism and both doing the work and teaching it at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And so my fiction journey is new, starting during the pandemic days. And so I've been very aware that I'm a newcomer to fiction, and to get a notice in the New York Times really has encouraged me. I'm under contract now with Tyndale for a World War II spy novel.
Mm.
So that is due in May. And so to answer your question, I'm still at it, still writing, still at it. And grateful for the work.
Well, I know, from the introduction of, your very first novel, it was going well from the beginning. And, I was so glad to see that. Because as you said, it's such a departure from, your journalism work and your nonfiction,
Yeah.
books that you had published previously. And it's just so exciting when someone kind of, goes off into a new direction and it's so successful.
Well, it's done well. It's had a solid track record so far. So I challenge myself to keep at it, even in it's a crazy world right now, right? Anyway, right? But in a crazy book market.
Mm.
So rather than wonder or worry where I fit along the way, how I compare, my task, my calling, my challenge is to get up every day and just do the work. So I enjoy that and keep commit myself to keep at it.
Good
So,
for you. Good for you.
yeah.
Well, I mean, since you mentioned the book market, why don't you bring us up to date on, kind of what the lay of the land is these days? I'm not quite as directly attached to it as I once was. What kinds of things are you seeing going on?
I'm seeing a saturated
Hmm.
book market. So many authors, so many aspiring authors. But what I noticed, Brian, is for all of us, there is an audience. And I'm not sure if you and I had this conversation, but one of the best things that's happened for me in this mystery writing that I've been doing is discovering who the audience is.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like many authors, of course, we want everybody to read our books. But what I discovered is that my core audience are women of a certain age who know the Lord or who have a faith profile, but also love a good mystery. And so at those Barnes and Noble signings that we talk about, that we were talking about, I can see my readers coming in the door. And so when my husband's with me, he'll point out to, somebody very young and says, oh, talk to that person. And I'll say, it's, probably not my reader. And so, in fact, often a younger person will say to me, oh, my mother would love this, or my mother-in-law would love this. I'm going to get this for my mother-in-law. Your birthday's coming up. And so seeing and perceiving who that audience is, and then speaking to those readers. Just last week, I was at an over 55 community and did a talk on the lessons from a Black fictional detective, life and lessons. The room was packed,
Good.
40, 50 people on a weekday morning. And that my audience. And so as I seek to honor them, serve them right for them, I find my place in a very, very crowded marketplace and just continue to do the work. And so I've really loved learning that. about honoring my audience and being excited about that.
Absolutely. It's so wonderful that, you've got that identified and you're
Yes,
acting. I mean, that's not an easy thing, right? Just from a business and a marketing perspective. So,
right. Yeah, it has. My husband says it has to do with. We would have talked about this. My protagonist in the mystery stories is a young African American theologian uh, who is struggling to solve crime and consequence in a very challenging, trying time in the Jim Crow era and the Klan era in my state. And so when I talk to people of my age, they grew up like I did before the civil rights movement. I was born in a segregated hospital, and a lot of my audience remember the whites only signs
hmm,
in the Jim Crow states and cities, and so it's not odd for them to um, get captivated by a young Black woman who is challenged by that time, but is also trying to solve a murder mystery. And so they get the character, they get the challenges that she's facing. They remember the time that they grew up in, and so we get to talk about those stories, but also what it was like to be a child um, in a tough time of well, I call it the stupid, awful Jim Crow days.
yeah.
And how do we find ourselves during that time? And now looking back, what do we know about it? What have we learned? So that's the work that I'm doing. And if I stay true to that and not try to be somebody else or do something else, then it seems to work out best.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think many of us are expecting some trying times here over the next few years. So, your experience in that regard, I think is going to be valuable for you, for your readers, for all of us. Um, what uh, what have you been reading and what are you expecting going forward?
Well, it's going to sound cliche, but what I have been reading is a daily Bible reading. First, you mentioned that I'm a regular contributor to our daily bread. But for years, my husband Dan and I have started every day reading over a devotional for the day.
Hmm.
Today, for example, the reading was from Exodus, where the Israelites are fleeing slavery from in Egypt at the behest of Moses. And they are so mad at him. They're saying, weren't there enough graves in Egypt? Why are you dragging us out here to the desert and they're going to capture us? Um, this is not going to turn out good. That's basically what the story says. But Moses tells them, don't be afraid. You will see your deliverance today. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. And so that kind of devotional reading that we do every day and that I do every day because I have to write devotionals um, keeps me standing during crazy times.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, I love that kind of encouragement that's available in the Bible, no matter how crazy times are, that
Hmm.
that you will, the Lord will fight for you, no matter what crazy thing is happening in Washington, no matter um, what nominees are getting uh, uh, reviewed, and cabinet members are getting reviewed and don't quite look competent. No matter how much California is burning,
Yes.
the Lord will fight for you.
Mm-hmm.
So after the election, Brian, I decided if to thrive in this culture that has brought us to this moment, what can you do and read and think about differently? So I have given sort of a new commitment to that daily Bible reading because it just blesses me so much. And then the other thing, somebody recommended the first autobiography written by Langston Hughes. Are you familiar with Langston
Yes.
Hughes? The thing that
Yeah, I don't think I've read any of his work, but I know a number of authors, and books that I've read have referred to him.
referred to him, the famed poet of the Harlem Renaissance. And so I started with the first one. It's called The Big C. Can you see it? That's what the cover looks like. I read it. I'm on my Kindle, but that's what the cover looks like.
Okay.
And it turns out that it is travel writing. He loved Harlem and lived in Harlem his entire adult life. But he traveled all over the world. He spent a lot of time in China, in Russia, in Japan, in Africa, in Paris, and all over France. After World War I, he covered the Spanish Civil War for a newspaper. He spent a lot of time in Mexico, where his father moved to flee from Jim Crow segregation in the U.S. And so he ended up speaking multiple languages and creating a life in a crazy time that was not self-limiting. And so after I read the first, it's really a memoir, but it's called an autobiography. But after I read the first one, then I just kept with it. I read the second one that he wrote called I Wonder as I Wander, which is another piece, long piece about just all this travel that he did and how he just loved people all over the world. And then there's a 3-volume biography about him called The Life of Langston Hughes that was written by a scholar at Stanford. In fact, he's a West Indian, a Caribbean writer. His name is Arnold Rampersad. And the lesson that I got out of reading so much about Langston Hughes is that you can live in trying times, but if you don't give into it and don't let it control you, you can live your own life. And that's what he did. It really, he says, travel your own road. And it really spoke to me, Brian, because he was criticized about his jazz poetry. In fact, a lot of Black authors said that he wrote his jazz poetry was a caricature of Black life and Black speech. But because he would sometimes write, quote unquote, in dialect. But he loved Black life and Black speech. And he never stopped writing. I ordered the collected poems of Langston Hughes. Look at this thing.
My goodness.
It's
wow.
You can use it to, it's like a door stopper, And so he became, Brian, listen to this. He became the first African-American writer to make a living from his writing.
Was he really? Wow. And travel.
And travel. And he wrote, I was looking today, he wrote poetry, he wrote short stories, novels, drama, fiction. I went to a play this Christmas based on one called The Black Nativity. And at the bottom it said by Langston Hughes.
Mm.
He wrote children's books.
Oh my goodness.
He wrote radio scripts. He did his work, then got on the next plane and took the next trip. And I have been so inspired by this way of being a writer,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and especially by a Black man who grew up at a time when the of disrespect for Black life. He just did not let it stop him.
I guess.
And so I'm excited to share that with you today. I saw a quote. I made a note from my notes yesterday, actually, a William Churchill quote that speaks to, in a way, how Langston Hughes lived. And it says, "You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks."
Oh, that's a
And
good one.
And so, like that's, I thought, well, that really defines the life that Langston Hughes lived. He just did not stop and get distracted by all the other stuff. So, what a lesson
Yes.
for
So
us now.
if other people want to, kind of dive into his work, I mean, do you suggest the same sequence that you described that you went through with his first memoir, starting with that?
That's what I would do, especially for people who maybe don't know his poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'd start with the big C, and then the titles start to make sense. And then the second one, I wonder as I wander. And
Okay.
then the biography is 3 volumes. And I just kept reading, and then I think, gee, I have to keep reading. And then I ordered the collected poems. And it was really a visual representation to me of just how much work he did. This
That's
is
just
just the
incredible.
poetry.
My goodness.
So I feel honored to share that with your audience today.
Well,
That's
I'm so
one of the
glad.
things I've been reading.
I'm so glad because, as I said, I've heard of him before, but I've never read any of his books or really investigated, who he was. And
Yeah,
so it sounds like he was a fascinating person.
compelling, really worth spending some time with, especially during this crazy time, because he lived himself in a crazy time.
So another one, I kept hearing about that I have now read some about is Howard Thurman.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I didn't really, realize or understand who he was and what he did until, I kept hearing about
Yes,
people that were, recently writing books about, some aspect of his life. So I went back and, started reading. I was, oh my goodness, this guy was amazing.
he's Dr. Martin Luther King's spiritual mentor.
Yes.
And Brian, his autobiography, again, it's called an autobiography, but it reads like a memoir. And for someone who wants an introduction to Howard Thurman, and it's a book about his struggle to make peace with his vocation, his calling to be a minister. And the very first story in that book, he is invited, he's filling in at a Negro hospital, a segregated hospital, for the chaplain there. And somebody is dying, and a nurse calls, and the chaplain is out of town. And so she talks to Howard Thurman and says, "Are you a minister?" And he says he reflects, but this question, this vocational question that just won't go away. Here it is again. And so he says to her, "Yes, I am a minister." And she says, "Well, please hurry. You don't want to be too late." And that opening scenario, isn't that good? That opening
Yes.
story sets the tone for that entire book about his search to make peace with his calling
Mm.
and be the person of faith, be the theologian that he's been being invited to be.
Mm.
And it's just good writing. So, and I mean, good reading. So for somebody else who is in this neighborhood, if you're in the Langston Hughes neighborhood, go ahead and pick up that Langston Howard Thurman's autobiography, the first one. It's really amazing writing.
Good, good. Well, let's go back to your writing again, in your mystery series. I mean, do you feel as though it offers an escape for folks, to kind of get away from the trials and tribulations of, today's world?
That's such a great question because, a murder mystery is about a murder. But more than that, it's about the detective in a mystery is doing the work of discovering the truth, not just about who done it, but the detective's own truth and the truth about this world that we're trying to navigate together. And so in my case, people are drawn to the mysteries because they are in Colorado, where I grew up. So people who live here enjoy it because they know the setting. But people who don't live here enjoy the mysteries because it's a new place for them. And one of the things that Sherlock Holmes, my character's a big reader of Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And there's a place where he says that the vilest alleys of London don't demonstrate more sin more than these beautiful countrysides, where there's mountains and streams, similar to Colorado. And so it seems to me that the a hard look that detective stories invite us to take still don't scare people away, even during these times. Because they allow us to reflect on how people move through hard times and at the end of the story get to the truth. And people are, we see politicians who don't tell the truth. We know what that feels, but the detective is not constrained by that. The detective is saying, yeah, but I'm going to find out what the truth is and tell it. And people seem to really appreciate that about the stories.
You used that phrase a minute ago, discovering the truth. And boy,
Yeah.
isn't that the most important thing these days to keep us grounded is to continuously try to do that. So even though you're portraying it in a fictional setting, that skill set and that drive to
That willingness. People say to me, I want to be like Annalise Payne. So, on the slide talk that I give, I have a slide that shows Nancy Drew. And of course, when I show the slide, everybody, laughs or applauds because we remember even Nancy in her time and day was doing exactly the same thing. Uncovering the truth that then inspires anybody watching that work to look at their own truth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, as you know, one of the platforms that I lead is called Finding Your Next Calling.
Uh-huh.
So what advice do you have for people who, are kind of earlier stage, maybe writers than what you are?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people that are considering going off on their own to do something new?
Pay attention. Writing is about paying attention, not just writing, but living and working is about paying attention. You've done that yourself in such amazing ways so that you see what's needed when it's needed. And that doesn't happen unless you're paying attention to what's happening. And it can happen in some curious ways. Dan and I are getting replacing old countertops in our kitchen. And so part of doing that means that we have to empty out all the things in the drawers and cabinets. And so, Brian, when I started doing that, I said, wait a minute, look at all this stuff that we don't need, we don't use. Let's get rid of it. And so we started in the kitchen. I've been doing that now, room by room, closet by closet. And my point is this, as we have been clearing out what we don't need or doesn't have any point in our lives anymore, then we can more clearly see the work that we should be doing. And so for people who are trying to, find your next calling, as you pay attention to these moments in your own life where something shifts and you suddenly have a new clarity about something, that is that calling, in the same way that Howard Thurman was unpacks it so amazingly in his book. That's the same way that calling, it comes to each of us and says, hello, this is the thing. But if you're not paying attention, but if we aren't paying attention, we'll miss it. So,
well, you've given me motivation to work on this project I've been putting off about cleaning out my closet and and some of my own drawers that, I've got things that need to be
yes,
pitched. But, it's just kind of an interesting insight about focus,
yes,
and concentrating on what really matters and removing the
removing
baggage.
removing what doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So, because it's hard to, we live in this, commercial marketplace here in the West, and that's a hard work if we've got all this, like in this same Winston Churchill way, if we're stopping to bark at every dog and we've got all this other stuff that doesn't need to be there. We can't do any of this work unless we cleared away a lot of other stuff that is begging us to be passed on to, somebody else's life.
Well, you make me think back to my recollections of people like my grandparents
Yes,
and how, they didn't have a lot of material things,
right.
right? But they had family, they had relationships, they had experiences,
Yes,
without the internet, without, the mall, without, all these material things that, and commercialization that we've occupied ourselves with.
right.
And,
And stuff, just stuff.
just stuff. And,
Yeah,
we can return ourselves to that world, without being a hermit or something. But,
right.
I think it's, hopefully if we can return ourselves to that perspective to some degree, that would be very helpful.
Yes. And we have in certain parts of the world, in all over the world, we if we're still living and breathing by God's grace, we have the opportunity to get up and give it another try the next day, and that's what we get, another try by God's grace, another try. So no, and the crazy stuff will still be crazy. It was crazy when you read the Bible. I love what those Israelites were saying to Moses today. Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? Why do you have to drag us out? Everybody has lived in a crazy time.
That's certainly true. That's certainly true. And the more history that I read, the more I realize that in different eras,
Yeah.
that's absolutely true.
And we don't do this work because life is perfect. We do it because it's not. We don't write these books because everything's good. We write it because everything isn't. So we,
I
so
remember I remember quoting you with that phrase quite some time ago, and I created a meme
I remember
that
that.
that was that quote that you just said because it's so profound and so
Yeah,
applicable to writers and their motivation, and so I
yeah.
appreciate you bringing that up again.
And it's funny, and when it comes to craft, a story gets better the more trouble there is. And and we don't get to the end until we go through some trouble. So, um, but we get grace and we get God's help, and we get friendship and kindness in the way that you've offered it to authors in such a profound way. And get up, as I say, the next day and try it again. So,
Amen. Amen. Well, Patricia, I really appreciate you joining us and having a conversation about, how things are going and your perspectives on getting through trying times are,
yeah.
as always, greatly appreciated. So many congratulations on all of your work and best wishes for the future. I can't wait to hear about this World War II novel when it's ready. So we'll have to make sure we get together then. But
Okay.
please, everyone, want to go check out Patricia's work at patriciaraybon.com.
Sign up for my author news note. I send it about-ish every month.
Yeah, she doesn't overwhelm you with, pestering you with emails or things. Well, thanks again, Patricia, and please stay in touch.
Thank you, Brian. You're the best. Thanks, everybody.